Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Unexplained Scary Stories podcast. Unlike some of the other episodes here, this time we're covering stories and experiences that have left us with more questions than answers. Just what sorts of things will we cover? That's for us to find out together. Remember, if you want to be part of a future episode, then you can send in your story with my user submissions email, tcfnarrations@gmail.com. Or you can go give me a follow on my Instagram @thecreepyfoxofficial, and you can send in your story there too. Also, thank you to Swamp Dweller for joining me on today's episode. He went ahead and narrated one of the stories. If you haven't checked out his channel, well, make sure to do so. He's one of the most hardworking narrators I know, and a really good friend too. Make sure to show him some love and check out what spooky stories he has. With all of that said, put on those detective hats, because we're jumping right into it. Let's get started. Story number 1. The New Year's Caller. I've listened to scary stories for quite some time, and I've never really heard about something like this happening. Just writing it out gives me the chills, as it still remains unexplained. With that said, I'll take you back to a cold, rainy night, New Year's. It was myself and my brother home alone, and we had spent the evening watching television. At one point, we put on a show on Netflix, letting the night roll over into the new year. Fast forward to 1 in the morning, and my brother was fast asleep on the couch next to me. I myself was half asleep, and that's when I was awoken by the sound of my cell phone. Confused, I take a look over at it, seeing that it was from an unknown number. I decided to ignore it at first, telling myself that if it was really important, they could leave a message. But almost immediately after they call the first time, they dial my number again. I really didn't want to answer it, so once again, I ignore it. Fast forward another 10 minutes, and there's no sign of phone calls. But just like that, the phone begins to ring. Again, it's showing it's an unknown caller. I was starting to get a bit curious, so I went ahead and answered this time. Hello? Who is this? Look, I think you have the wrong number, buddy. I can't really help you out. Happy New Year. I then end the call, thinking that the person on the other end had called me by accident. Who knows, maybe they'd move on. I placed the phone next to me, and I grabbed the remote to turn up the volume. But 10 seconds later, I feel the vibration, and again, it's the same thing. I'm starting to get creeped out by this point. I don't know why I didn't just block the number, but I decided to answer it once again. Now, the conversation that I have in the next 30 or so seconds was so chilling and so disturbing that I sometimes have nightmares. It was more or less something like this. Look, pal, my phone is showing an unknown caller. If this is the same person that just called me a few seconds ago, I already told you, you have...
Be quiet for a second. Just listen to me very closely.
There is heavy breathing for a good 10 seconds. It's as if the person on the other end was catching their breath.
I just finished running away from the house.
Okay, so why are you calling some random person like me over and over again, and why are you telling me this?
My wife, my family, they... well, I extinguished their lives. They won't be heard from ever again. I wanted to call someone and tell them.
In that moment, I thought this was some sort of weird confession by a maniac who'd just done the unthinkable. I tell him I'd be calling the police, and he replies with,
Yeah, there's no way you're going to do that. Don't you know why your phone says unknown caller? I'll tell you why. It's because I'm calling from a payphone. You have no way of tracking me down.
Before he could get another word in, I end the call and run downstairs in panic. I was paranoid, thinking that maybe this person might try to find me next. I know it sounds really silly, but in those moments, I was honestly so scared. Fast forward a couple of days later, and I tried doing some research. I looked up any possible crimes that could have involved what he mentioned, but nothing. So, if anyone has ever received a call like this, then maybe you can help me out so we can figure this out together. Story number 2. He was waiting in the dark.
To this day, I don't know who this strange man was. What exactly am I talking about? Let's go ahead and get started. It was around 2007, and I was staying over at my friend Abigail's house. She lived out in northern Oklahoma, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. She had left for the weekend on a business trip, and she was paying me $100 to take care of her pets. Since her house was 2 hours away from me, she told me I was more than welcome to stay at her house. I really didn't mind since she lived near a farm. As for the nearest town, it was at least 30 minutes away, with the nearest neighbors being 3 miles apart. So, on the first night I was there, I was with her German Shepherd, Roxy, on the couch, and we were watching reruns of Cops. Around 2 a.m., I had fallen asleep to the static on the TV. Suddenly, I was awoken by the sound of Roxy growling. Confused at what could have been taking place, I looked around for her, but had noticed she was nowhere in the living room. Her growling sounded like it was coming from a distance. I get up from my tired state and start stumbling around trying to find her. The growling then starts to get louder as I make my way over to the kitchen. There Roxy is, growling and scratching at the back door. It's one of those sliding glass doors. What I see on the other side was super creepy. There's a man, I want to describe in his late 40s, just staring into the room. I thought I was seeing things at first, until I started to notice them going for the doorknob. Excuse me, sir, but was there something I could help you with? He doesn't respond. Instead, he stops what he is doing and runs off into the dark. I wasn't sure if he had a weapon on him, so I don't even bother with chasing him. Instead, I go ahead and call the cops, who showed up about 30 minutes later. I gave them a description, and they checked the surrounding farmlands. Sadly, they come up empty-handed. Since there was no signs of the stranger, there was nothing they could really do. That should have been the end of things, but they were about to get a whole lot worse. The next day goes by fairly normally. I wake up and take care of some chores at Abigail's house, and at around 5 p.m., I decided to take Roxy with me into town. Abigail had set up an appointment for her, and I was going to take her to get a bath. In the meantime, I would do some shopping. We returned home around 8 p.m., but noticed something was different. The most obvious was the front window was completely open. Now yes, it was pretty warm that summer, and I did leave the windows open, but one thing I knew for sure was that I had locked everything before leaving. Unless Abigail would come back home early, there would be no way someone would have been able to do that, right? In trying to figure this out, I had forgotten about the weird man from the other night. I leave Roxy in the back of the car, with windows down of course, and head over to check out the house. I head inside, and nothing seemed different. It was kind of eerie that it was just everything looked the same, if that makes sense. You know, when you know there's something wrong, but you can't tell what. So blaming my forgetfulness, I bring Roxy inside, and we settle down for dinner. At this point, I had called Abigail and told her about what happened the other night. She goes on to say that she had a similar experience a year ago. She said someone had been following her, and had tried to break into her house. However, he was never caught. Could it have been that this creeper had waited a whole year to make his move? I wasn't sure, but later on that evening, something took place. Around 2 a.m., I ended up waking up to use the restroom. Roxy was outside in her fancy doghouse, which meant I was in there alone. While in the restroom, I began to hear movement in the guest bedroom. I opened the restroom door and started tiptoeing my way back to the room. I peeked through the opening of the door, and what I saw was one of the creepiest sights of my life. Someone with a ski mask was holding an axe staring at the bed. I now watched as he began taking swings at it. My best guess was he thought I was in the bed, but the question was, where did he come from? I looked to the corner and noticed the closet was open. I started to connect everything. The window was open because he had snuck in. He then waited in the closet until I fell asleep. He must have fallen asleep too and not realized. That's when he snapped out from his sleep and decided to try to kill me. I'm just assuming at this point, though. Anyways, scared for my life, I ran out of the house as quietly as I could and called the police. While waiting, I watched from a distance as he walked into the field behind Abigail's house. I see the headlights of a minivan turn on, then he drives off, never to be seen again. Officers do a search of the area and they look more into it, but nothing ever came of it. I don't know who that man was, but something tells me he had planned for this for a long time.
Story number 3 from the Great Beyond. Here's an unexplainable story that I'd love to get some answers to. It's a story that was sent in to me that recalls what I believe is paranormal. Who knows? Let's dive into it and retell it. I've changed some of the wording to make the story flow smoothly, but not to worry, the plot and story remains the same. I'll begin with the ever so important background. I was 15 years old when this took place, and my best friend Rachel was 14. We grew up together and always spent time doing various activities. Honestly, we were sort of like sisters. I digress. The point is that one evening I had decided why not stay over at Rachel's house for a sleepover. This was very common practice of us. Of course, there was something pretty neat about the area in which Rachel lived. See, unlike most of the homes that are already pre-built with an idea in mind, her neighborhood was a little more unique. The construction of these homes was designed with the idea of customizing your home to your liking. Want a 3-story home with a pool and the biggest entertainment room you can think of? You got it. Just let the construction company know. Even with that idea in mind, most of the homes in this neighborhood were yet to be built. There were a couple here and there, but the neighborhood was outnumbered by more trees and wilderness. See, there was a set of woods that surrounded the properties. This meant that at night, it was almost impossible to see. It didn't help that there were no streetlights. Now that you have a basic understanding of the area, I'll begin my story. As I mentioned, I'd gone to her house with the purpose of spending time with her. As the sun set in the distance, we began coming up with ideas of how to spend our evening. That's when it hit me. Why not go out at night and take our bicycles with us? After all, the evening was nice and cool. Plus, we thought why not go visit another friend of ours. He lives in the same neighborhood further up the road, so not too much of a ride. We arrived and we spent a couple of hours with him. Fast forward some time later, and we start heading back to Rachel's house. As we arrived, we thought, the night is still young. Why do we want to go back inside? I know, let's keep exploring. Thus, Rachel and I take another nearby road that led us further into the dark. This road takes us away from most people, and out here, there aren't really any signs of anyone. I was on one side of the road, and Rachel was on the one next to me. Everything was going fairly normally, until I experienced something so scary it remains scarred in my memory. Oh, I should mention that I had a backpack on and had one of those portable speakers you can connect your iPod or phone to. So I'm in the middle of selecting another song for our ride when I hear Rachel scream at the top of her lungs. I was confused, but as I pondered this, she ended up bumping into me, causing me to fall forward. She continues pedaling for another few seconds until she realizes I wasn't following her. Here's where I see it. I look behind me to where Rachel was looking, and what I see was this. There is a man walking on the far side of the road, and that's when I thought to myself, really, Rachel? You made a big deal about some random guy walking around at night? You do realize that people sometimes walk in this area, right? Then I realized it. He approaches me and stares right at me, but he has no face. I wish I was joking, but I'm serious. I take my phone light and shine it up to his hoodie. After all, it's pretty dark out. Surely the hoodie covered his face and his identity. The thing is, I was frozen in place at that sight. I couldn't let out a yell or scream. I now watched as he walked into the night, and just like that, it's like he disappeared. We were so left in shock, Rachel calls her mother, telling her to help look for the man. But here's the thing, there were no buildings or homes near us that he could have snuck into. Like I said, it's like he vanished into thin air. I guess he could have gone into the nearby woods, but there are no signs of that either. As we're now returning to Rachel's home, we talk about how it looked like he was wearing old-fashioned clothing that you would find from back in the day. Oh, I guess I forgot to mention that there is a cemetery not too far from us. Could it be that what we saw was the apparition of someone? We aren't sure, but we never went out at night ever again. Story number 4. The Strange Lights in the Desert. I just remembered this one the other day after listening to a video discussing strange events. I'm hoping with sharing this that someone might be able to help me with some sort of answer. Here it is. Allow me to take you back to when I used to live in Reno, Nevada, back in the late 90s. I was in my early 20s and going to college. Just your average ordinary dude. One day, I had grown bored in my usual routine of studying and going to class, and decided to take a day off. I went to visit a friend of mine who was living in Vegas. That's not really important to the story, though. On the way back, I decided to take a break somewhere in the middle of the Nevada desert. So there I was, just eating a sandwich I had packed, when I noticed what looked like some lights in the sky. I thought they were just a plane, and so I ignored them at first. However, as I watched the lights, they began moving in ways that I couldn't explain. It's kind of like they had the ability to move how they wanted. I know it sounds really weird. Trust me, I know. Well, after watching them for about 5 minutes, they slowly started to make their way over a mountain range. A few minutes later, I began to hear the sounds of helicopters. Soon enough, there are 2 helicopters chasing after the lights. Weird, but it gets worse. In the distance, I began to see headlights approaching. I was curious, so I waited for them to get closer. They stopped a good ways from me, and they just stayed there parked, not one ever getting out. The van just remained still. This was when I started to get creeped out and drove out of there. But that's not before the van followed me for about 20 minutes. Fast forward a few days later, and I'm home alone eating some of my mom's leftover chicken pasta. It's around 7 p.m., and the doorbell rings. I walk over, expecting it to be the neighborhood kids. See, they were selling cookies and chocolate at the time as part of a school project. I actually really enjoyed the chocolate chip cookies and figured I'd grab my wallet and buy some. Opening the door, though, reveals something different, to say the least. In front of me are 2 men in matching suits with sunglasses on. I thought maybe they were police officers at first. So I say, good evening, officers. Was there anything I can help you with? They are silent for about 10 seconds before one of them finally speaks up.
We came to talk to you about something that you saw a few nights ago.
I then looked at the driveway, and I saw the same van that had followed me a couple of nights ago. In summary, they tell me that what I saw was never to be told to anyone. That was it. I would occasionally see the same van parked outside my home, but no one ever stepped out. Eventually, I moved away, and I never saw them again. I'm not sure who they were, and to this day, it remains a mystery. Any ideas, guys? I'm looking for any possible explanation. Thanks. Number 5. Strange sighting in the woods. I was going through a pretty rough time a couple of months ago. I was in between jobs and wasn't going to school either. Most of my days I would just spend on the computer or stuck in my room. For some background, I was 20 years old and living in Phoenix, Arizona. One day, my friend Catherine called me, wanting to know if I wanted to go with her to go visit her family's cabin. Hey there, it's been a while since we last talked. I'm gonna be heading up into the mountains and staying at her family cabin. You remember the one, right? I want to go write some music, but I want to be away from the city. Anyways, I wanted to know, did you want to come and spend some time with me? Come on, it'll be good for you. I knew which cabin she was talking about. It was one about an hour north from us further up in the mountains. Growing up, I would often accompany her and her family as we spent time together. Anyways, it was near a hillside. So, let me describe the cabin. When you step through the front door, you are introduced to a living room. Directly across from the entrance, you will see the back door. On top of it is a large window. To the left, you have the hallway that leads to one of the rooms. And if you kept walking past it, you would reach the kitchen with the kitchen back door leading to a patio. And down the same hall on the other side is the restroom, then the room I would be staying in. As for the bed, it was located in a corner with a TV directly in front of it. From there, you have a window and closet. Mind you, the window gave you a full view of the backyard, if you want to call it a backyard. It's here you can see the tree line. Okay, with that information about the cabin out of the way, let's fast forward to the third night. Catherine had already gone to bed, and I was on my laptop watching movies that I had brought with me. So now it's around 2 a.m., and I began to hear what sounds like footsteps outside. I thought this was weird, as it was easily 15 degrees out there. If Catherine was really outside the cabin, she sure chose a weird time to be there. Curious, I get up from bed and I look out the window, but I'm unable to see anything at first. That's until the porch lights turn on. On the outskirts of the light, I'm able to make out what looks like a really tall and hairy figure, and now watch as it stumbles into the tree line and then it disappears. I thought it was really creepy, but I put it down to some animal. Next morning, we wake up and we head outside. In the dirt, we're able to see animal tracks. These tracks are like ones I've never seen before. They look like they belong to an elk or a moose of some kind. But that's funny. What I saw the other night was clearly standing on 2 legs. I mentioned this detail to Catherine, but unfortunately, we're unable to explain it. However, before leaving, we would get one final visit from whatever this thing was. It's around 7 p.m., and we were putting everything in the back of Catherine's car. All of a sudden, we began to smell something strange. It wasn't noticeable at first, but all of a sudden, the scent became almost unbearable. It was like a mix of rotten eggs and iron. But where was this smell coming from? We now did our best to ignore it, and finally, we were ready to leave. Once in the car, we see something behind one of the trees. It looks like a tall figure that's staring back at Catherine and I. We thought it was just the shadow of the tree, and we ignored it, but that's until it moved. We now turn on the headlights, and what we see sends a chill. We see what looks like glowing eyes and a figure with antlers. It's hard to tell because the trees and shrubbery were covering it. Seconds later, we see it run off into the woods. We were only able to see it for a few seconds, but from what we could tell, it was an animal we couldn't identify. Last thing that happened was the sound of a scream. It sounded like the mix of a person and an animal, if that makes any sense. Now, I've talked to a friend of mine that is Native American. He tells me of many legends and folklore with similar descriptions and sightings, so I'm not exactly sure what we saw. It was creepy to say the least, and it remains unexplained. Story number 6. Strange Activity in the Warehouse. I sent in a story to the Creepy Fox 2 years ago, talking about my job as a security guard back in the early 2000s in Europe. Basically, I worked for a small private housing community. What ended up happening was one of the old homes was experiencing strange, unexplained activity. Things like the lights turning on and off, and the owner seeing shadows and hearing voices. After having somebody bless the house, things returned to normal. I mentioned these details before I get into my experience for a reason. Anyways, even after that, I was pretty much still a skeptic of the paranormal and unexplained. So, I ended up quitting my security job there, and I moved to working at an old grocery store warehouse. The hours there were more or less the same, but I chose to work here since it was closer to my house and would save time driving. I digress. It seemed that my encounters with unexplained happenings was only just beginning. It started about 2 months after I hired in. I was working in the evenings, pretty much just keeping an eye on the CCTV cameras and making sure nobody came onto the property. Pretty basic necessities. I should also mention that we usually had one person working at any given time. This was due to save hours. If someone else did arrive, it would be the drivers who brought in groceries and other supplies. We had to deal with this too. Not that it was too much of a problem, since our store is pretty small. Anyways, on one night, I was patrolling the outskirts of the main building when one of the alarms went off. I recognized it as the alarm from the main office. It was located inside. Fearing someone might have broken in, I make my way over to the back, expecting to see the door open. However, it's closed. I then try to open it, but it's locked. I head inside, and immediately I get this really cold breeze that hits me out of nowhere. Now, this was during the middle of August in Arizona, and even at 1 a.m., it was still a good 82 degrees. Yes, it could have been the air conditioning, and this was something I took into consideration. However, it didn't explain the loud crash I heard coming from deep inside the building. I was now almost certain that somebody was in here, but my priority was to check the alarm. I walk over and disable it, and I listen to see if there's any more noise. Nothing. I check the rest of the building, and it's empty. Deciding it was just a malfunction, I return back to my station, and I call management. They tell me they would send somebody to fix it in the morning. Well, fast forward a couple of hours later, and it's around 3:30 a.m. I'm with my cup of coffee listening to the radio when I happen to look at one of the security screens. There, in the back corner of one of the feeds, I can see what looks like the shadow of a person walking down a hallway. This was near one of the aisles of food that I had checked that had things fallen over. I was certain my eyes were playing tricks on me, but as I paid more attention to the screen, I realized I wasn't just seeing things. I grabbed my baton and taser, and I now make my way back inside. After searching for about 10 minutes, I come up empty. However, just as I'm about to leave, I'm able to hear what sounds like somebody whispering. It's strange. It almost sounded like somebody was calling for help, and that's when it hit me. I hadn't checked the basement. The only reason I didn't bother with it was because it was more or less a storage room. Also, it was locked with a key, so no way anyone would have gotten in there. To test this, I grab my keys and I make my way down. Now, it's important to note that there is no air conditioning down here, and it's easily in the 80s. I am hit with air that feels like it's 50. Well, once I'm at the bottom of the stairs, I begin to hear what sounds like crying. Now, I'm a pretty tough dude, but I'll admit hearing the sounds of crying in a basement in the middle of the night is going to test your bravery. So I start shining my flashlight to a set of boxes, and I kid you not, one of them falls over, just like that. It spooked me, but I went over to see if something had pushed it. There was no ventilation, and jumping up and down next to it caused nothing to happen. At this point, I get on the radio, and I call my managers. All I get on the other end, though, was static. Figuring I had no connection, I start to make my way back to the stairs. That's when I had one final experience. I hear footsteps behind me, and I turn around. Down the hallway, I'm able to make out what looks like a girl with long dark hair and a white gown with glowing eyes. I pretty much drop my tough guy act, and I run out of the building. I call the manager, and he has a surprising response.
Oh, you must have run into Abigail. Sorry, I guess we haven't told you. Before this warehouse was built, there used to be an old psych hospital on this land. Sadly, you can imagine the history of passings. Since we don't pay attention to her or show her we're scared, she usually doesn't do anything. Once you start showing you're creeped out, that's when things start happening to you.
Let's just say I was really angry with them and ended up putting my 2 weeks. After that, I had the occasional weird things happen, but nothing as bad as those previous encounters. Number 7. Are you alone? Here's an interesting story that was sent in. Imagine it, being home alone, when suddenly your phone starts to ring. To your surprise, someone on the other end is trying to get inside your home. That's the story of one unfortunate person. Let's retell this creepy, unexplained experience, shall we? Hello, Mr. Creepy Fox. The name is John, and I'm here today to tell you about a weird experience that I had back in the early 2000s. The only reason I still remember it is because you don't just forget about something like this. For some background, I grew up in northern Nebraska, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town was about 10 miles away from me. I mentioned this because we rarely got visitors. Honestly, the only people who visited were family and friends. I guess you can summarize it like this. If you didn't know where our home was, you would miss it. That's because our home was located at the end of a mile-long dirt road. Anyways, I was a teenager at the time, and one evening I had stayed home alone. My parents were going to be visiting their longtime friends from high school, but I wasn't really interested. I made up a story saying that I was sick, but in all honesty, I wanted to play the new Super Mario game that they had bought me. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Anyways, it was more or less around 10 p.m., and I was there with my chips and soda. As I was in the middle of one of the bonus levels, I began to hear the undeniable sounds of the phone ringing. I ignored it the first time, thinking it might be a telemarketer. Then it rang for a second time. I figured perhaps it might be my parents calling to let me know they were going to start heading back home. I head over to the phone and I answer.
Hello? Mom? Is that you?
To my surprise, it's not my parents. I began to hear heavy breathing, followed by what sounds like somebody singing. It honestly sounded like somebody was using one of those creepy voice changers. Thinking it was a prank call, I end the conversation and I make my way back to the TV. But not even 10 seconds later, the ringing commences. I'm genuinely creeped out at this point, but somewhat curious as to who could be calling.
Look, I don't know what the big idea is, but you got the wrong number.
Hey there, are you home alone? I can see you through the window.
I froze like an ice cube. Was someone really outside my house and looking in? I didn't get an answer as the phone goes silent. It's now I dare to not look over to the window. However, I start making my way over to the curtains, and when I open them, I only reveal an empty farmland. With my hands shaking, I start making my way to all the doors, making sure they are locked. Throughout this, there is no signs of anybody outside. Oh, and in case you're wondering why I didn't call for help right away, it's because the closest officers were at least 20 minutes away. If I called them without checking for the doors to be locked, this possible creeper could have gotten inside. Well, I told myself this was a prank call, as no signs of activity were outside my home. For some dumb reason, I was worried I would have wasted officers' time with my call. A dumb mistake, I know. Fast forward an hour, and my parents still hadn't arrived. I couldn't sleep due to the scare, so I stayed on the couch with my baseball bat. Eventually, my parents arrived an hour later, and I explained what had taken place. The next morning is when we saw it. There was a box on the back porch. We open it, and we reveal some really creepy things. There were a bunch of pictures of our home, but what was even creepier was that some of the photos appear to be taken from a distance. In some of them, you could even see myself and my family outside. Here's something else to note. In some of the pictures, you can see a rose garden my mother had planted. We had put it up until about 3 months ago, until we got rid of it. I determined that this guy had been stalking us for quite some time, and that's pretty much it. I know it's not as scary as most of the stories, but think of it like this. Imagine never finding out who had been stalking you and your home for who knows how long. And just think that we never found out who called our home. Officers never did find anyone, as we really had no leads, so it still remains a mystery to this day. Story number 8. There was a secret room in our home. I want to take you back to when I lived in an old Victorian-style home in the late 1990s. It was a 3-story building in the middle of Pennsylvania with 6 bedrooms, 2 baths, and an old basement that was unfinished. Growing up there, I remember many strange things taking place, but us never really being able to explain it. What we found out at the end is both creepy and unexplained. But let me tell you about some of the things that happened in that house. The 3rd level acted kind of like an attic. There was a bed if someone wanted to sleep up there, but we mainly left it closed. There would be times I would be home alone, and sometimes I would hear footsteps upstairs. I was always too scared to look up there, until one day my friend Nathan came over. We were playing with an Ouija board in the attic, and we were just talking about random things. We talked to the board, saying things like, "Is there anyone else in here with us? If so, what's your name, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself?" It gave us generic answers, but there were some things that we noted. It told us something about a secret room, going on to say things like uncover and treasure. We figured this whole board thing was nothing but a bogus joke, and soon forgot about it. Fast forward a couple of days later, and the activity in the house seemed to have escalated. I would have strange dreams about a man in a tuxedo coming into my room saying he needed help. I blamed it on my over-imagination, and I never really tried to connect anything. One day, my mom, dad, and I had gone to the park to have a picnic with some neighbors. It was fairly uneventful. That's until coming back. As we head down the dirt path heading toward our house, something seemed off. We are able to see a light in the distance. It's pretty dim, and at first, my dad says it was most likely a star in the sky. However, as we got closer to the house, we noticed the light was coming from the 3rd-story room, otherwise known as our attic. One thing was for sure, the light doesn't turn on by itself. You would have to manually turn it on. That's not what caught our attention. What does is what looks like a shadow that passes by the window. Strange enough, was it looked like somebody in a tuxedo and a top hat. It's sort of like the ones you would see worn back in the early 1900s. My dad went into full protective mode, grabbing his Service M9 and telling us to stay in the car. I should mention, but he's a police officer. Anyways, he does an entire search of the house, but he's unable to find anyone. You can imagine that at this point, my parents are starting to believe me when I told them that I was having weird experiences. They weren't believing me at first. They were just saying it was my over-imagination. Well, fast forward a couple of months later, and that's when we were in the process of moving. We had a plumber inspecting some of the pipes down in the basement, and that's when he noticed something. As he tapped on one of the walls, he noted that it was hollow, almost as if there was another room. Sure enough, we drill a small opening, and we notice what appears to be like a hidden room. So, with the help of my uncle and a family friend, they ended up tearing it down. What they find inside was both creepy and unexplained. There were a bunch of ritual-like symbols, even things that you would find in places like cults. But what was the most unsettling was the box that we found. My dad opens it, and we find a bunch of pictures of what looks like some sort of weird cult. The pictures themselves seem to contain the same people, and they were all wearing the same kind of uniform. There was one person in the picture that I recognized almost immediately, a man in a suit and a top hat. He looked just like the man from my nightmares, and even the shadows we were seeing. From what I could tell, it looked like they were taken from back in the 1960s. I then did some research on it, but unfortunately, I was never able to find out who the people were. The only thing we knew about the house was that it belonged to an old couple who had passed about 5 years before we moved in. So, yeah, it's remained a mystery to us since. The only reason I remember it is because I want to go find those old pictures. If I remember correctly, we have them in storage somewhere. Some contain some gruesome sights, so I think I'll just share them with those that want to see them. Anyways, that's it. The Mysterious Green Eyes. Hey everybody, it's the Creepy Fox. Just a quick note before I start reading this experience. After reading through it, I still can't come up with an explanation. Not sure if it's paranormal or something else, but maybe we can come up with some ideas together. Okay, let me start. Hello everyone. The following story I'm about to tell you talks about something that has happened to me throughout my lifetime. This isn't something I would make up, as I gain nothing from doing so. I just want to see if someone could give me an explanation. That, or maybe I could find some comfort knowing this hasn't just happened to me. I should start by telling you that I was pretty much a skeptic up until the strange events started taking place. So, like any story, I will take you back to the beginning, when I was younger and I was living in the Netherlands. I apologize ahead of time for the length of this, but I really want to paint a picture for you all, really make you feel like you grew up with me. So the town I lived in was one of those where everybody knew each other. You could go to the grocery store and you could see your neighbors, or you could even leave your doors and windows unlocked. The town was even small enough that you could walk from one end to the other in about 15 minutes. Something else to mention was the fact that there weren't many kids. Luckily, most of us were friends. So, I'll mention two of them. We will call them Frank and George. The three of us were just walking around doing whatever we could to entertain ourselves. I forget exactly, but it was silly things like prank calls and ringing doorbells and running away. As we started getting bored of this, George mentioned something that we had forgotten. Hey, do you guys want to go and visit the farmlands from the other side of town? There are these beehives there. I've been wanting to see them for a while. I know. Why don't we go throw some rocks at them and run away? Yeah, not exactly the smartest idea. So, in order to reach these lands, you need to walk through some grassy fields. The farm fields were then separated by a small set of woods. Nothing too large, but enough to where someone or something could be hiding. My friends and I walked through the fields just fine, and were now on a dirt trail. Eventually, I tripped and I looked down at my shoes. My shoelaces were untied. Deciding not to keep my friends, I tell them, just go without me. Let me tie my shoes really quickly. Besides, I want to stretch a little bit before we continue on. They agreed, and I stayed behind to take care of what was in front of me. Sounds like the perfect time for something creepy to happen. Being left alone in the middle of nowhere with your friends up ahead of you. Well, unfortunately, that's what ended up happening. I sat down to tie my shoes, and I took the moment to look into the forest. Picture a forest with a wall of trees. I looked through a small clearing, and I saw something. I could see a man who looked like he had a gray shirt on, but that's not what was creepy. I kid you not, as it still remains in my memory. His eyes were bright green. It's almost as if the sunset was reflecting off of his eyes. Next thing I remember was everything going dark. Hey, wake up. Wake up, man. Come on, this isn't funny. You're scaring us. I woke up with a slight headache, confused at what had taken place. Did I really pass out? I wasn't sure, but Frank told me that he had just seen me staring into the woods without moving whatsoever. He only noticed me because he realized how long I was taking. About a minute later, I remember the man, and I looked back into the forest, but he was long gone. I wrote it off as some sort of hallucination, and I tried to forget it. But don't worry, this story isn't over just yet. We fast forward a few months after. I was over at a friend's house. That's when we decided to go play in the same forest. It was my friend, my brother, and a few others. We were playing attackers and defenders. There was a bridge by a river that we needed to try and take over. My friend and I were playing on the attacking team. As we waited to attack, I noticed something strange further up through the trees. No lie, but I saw one of the scariest things in my life. It looked like a person moving. The more I paid attention to it, the more I realized where I had seen it. The man with the t-shirt from a few months ago. The way he was walking was so weird. He was stumbling, and his arms and limbs were super long. I hadn't noticed them the first time, as the trees had been covering most of him, But what made my skin crawl was when he turned around. The same green eyes, accompanied by a creepy smile. I waste zero time sticking around. I scream, and I grab my friends and tell them to follow me. Once we reached my friend's house, I explained what had happened. We then tried doing some research, but we couldn't find anything. Now, let me fast forward even more time. I'm now almost 30 years old. I've been to the doctors plenty of times, and they know as well as I do that I'm stable and clear-minded. A month ago, I was at the bus station and had just finished a date with a girl I liked. When she was on the bus, I start making my way back home. Side note, it was already pretty dark, so I wanted to get home before it got too late. As I'm making my way down a dark, quiet street, I saw somebody standing underneath a street lamp. They weren't moving, they were just standing there. I continued to walk closer, disregarding him as he was in my way. When I got closer, he ended up turning around, and what I saw made me remember something I had tried to forget so many years ago. The same bright green eyes. However, this time they had a creepy face full of anger. He raised his arm at me, trying to grab me, but before doing anything, I run out of there back to my house, and when I looked out the window, he was nowhere to be seen. That's my story, and to this day, I don't know what it is I'm experiencing. I've tried looking it up online, but so far, nothing has come up. Maybe somebody could chime in and tell me if they have experienced something like this. I'll check the comments section for the time being, so please, serious replies only. Thanks. Story number 10. Shadow Man in the Attic. Back in the 1990s, I used to work as a maid cleaning houses in Southern California. This acted as my part-time job while I went to college. It was great for the first year, as it worked really well with my schedule. One day, the lady I cleaned houses for, who we will call Victoria, told me about her sister's house. It was about half an hour away, but she had told Victoria that she was looking for someone to clean her house. Of course, I jumped at the opportunity, seeing as it was now winter break, and I had extra time to clean. As for the first couple of weeks, I would clean her sister Judy's house, and things were pretty normal. However, I had to quit after some really strange things started to take place. I'll go ahead and explain what I mean. For starters, I always felt this really negative energy. It's hard to explain it, but it's like someone or something wanted me out. As for Judy and her husband, they were never there, as this acted as their summer house. This meant that they left the house open for me to clean, and any time I wasn't there alone, I would feel eyes on me. Even so, the house was beautiful. It was right next to the ocean and gave you a perfect view of the beach, and even the waves as they crashed against a cliffside. Anyways, my first experience happened one random winter evening. I remember having no electronics on, and I was upstairs cleaning the restroom. All of a sudden, I could hear what sounded like people arguing downstairs. I stop what I'm doing, and I take a listen, as I thought perhaps the noise was coming from outside. However, there was a problem with that. No one was outside, and the street was absolutely silent. Curious and slightly spooked, I grab my broom and I make my way to the staircase, with the talking getting even louder. But once I'm downstairs, I find the source of the noise. See, it turned out that the television had turned on. But how? I was the only one in the house, and I never heard anybody arrive. Even so, I ended up calling out, but of course, nobody responded. The next 5 or so minutes has me trying to figure out how the TV turned on. Perhaps the remote had fallen on the ground and the power was pressed? But how was that possible? I mean, the remote was still on the couch. Also, they have no pets, so it's not like they could have done it. So I once again call out to the homeowners, but as always, I'm greeted with silence. I turn the TV off now and I head back to cleaning, not thinking much of it. Even with all of this, things were about to get even more strange in the coming weeks. See, I would have my radio I brought with me on, but all of a sudden, it turned off by itself. I thought perhaps the house at this point had electric issues, so I called the power company to do some tests. They ended up saying that there was nothing wrong with the power and that perhaps the electronics were at fault. This seemed to calm my nerves, but that's until other things would happen, and that had me calling it quits. I remember I was cleaning the attic room. I always despised going up there, as the sensations of being watched were worse. It was really dark, and for some reason, I would feel really anxious. You could even feel cold air, and even oftentimes you'd get goosebumps just standing up there. But of course, the cleaning had to be done, as Judy would have gotten mad if dust started to collect. So there I was, cleaning the windows, when all of a sudden, I hear something fall behind me. When I turn around, I reveal a box used for storage with pictures that are now scattered all over the carpet. And what happens next, I would never forget. As I go to pick up the pictures, I notice old photographs of Judy and Victoria. In some of the photos, you could even see her grandfather, who had passed a few years earlier. Well, not only do I feel someone's hand on my shoulder, but, I kid you not, I hear something be whispered to me. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I do remember running out of the attic. Once I was downstairs, I called my cousin over to help me grab my things. He was one to never believe me when I told him about the strange activity in the house. So, when he arrived 20 minutes later, we both head up into the attic one final time, and this would be the final straw. As we're picking up and cleaning the supplies that we had left, that's when we happen to look at the mirror that's on a dresser. In the reflection, we could see what looked like an old man in clothing from the 1940s. We now watched as he walked into a back corner. However, when my cousin and I turned back to see, there was nothing. Let's just say that my cousin immediately believed everything I told him because he was the first one to run out of the house. To this day, I have no explanation to what happened in that house, and I hope I never have to experience something like this ever again. Story number 11. Someone mimicked my friend's voice. When it happened, I was left confused. I thought perhaps what I experienced was unexplained, but part of me thinks perhaps this was paranormal. Let me know what all of you think. With that said, let me get started with the story. Late 2009, I was on a camping trip with a couple of my friends from school. We will call them Jacob and Kelly. All of us were 17, and we loved the outdoors. So much that when summer vacation arrived, we ended up going into the Alabama wilderness. After walking on some marked trails for a couple of hours, we ended up finding ourselves a camping spot that was right next to a river. Fast forward to around 3 a.m., and I woke up from a nightmare. However, the anxiousness didn't stop, as I still felt the sensation of panic. I wake up my friends, and I tell them about how I was feeling. Eventually, they calm me down, and they go back to bed. However, I was still feeling really ill. That's when I decided, why not take a small walk, and I hoped that this would clear my mind. So, I'm walking near the river, and that's when I suddenly got the feeling of eyes on me. As I looked around, I don't see anything at first, but then on the other side of the river, I'm able to hear branches being moved, and then I can see what looks like glowing eyes. This was accompanied by a smell of iron and garbage. I now watched as these eyes stare at me for about 30 seconds until they backed up into the woods. Once again, I got paranoid, and I decided that it's a good time to head back to the tent. But as I walk over, I can hear Kelly call out to me, "Hey, Lexi, come over here." She repeated that phrase a few times, but something about it seemed off. It's like her voice was being mimicked. But here's where it's even more weird. The voice was coming from the opposite end of where our campsite was, where I was just a few minutes ago. Unless Kelly had gone looking for me, there would have been no way she could have been out there. Just then, I hear Kelly and Jacob's voice, but this time it was coming from the campsite. 10 seconds later, they appeared through the trees looking for me. Now, what happens next is all of us hearing a loud screech that sounded like a mix between a wolf and a human. Let's just say it spooked us so badly that we quickly packed up our things and we left. To this day, we have no idea who was mimicking my friend's voice and who the scream belonged to. Story number 12. Something in the basement. Around 2003, I was going through my grandma's old storage room, and that's when I happened to stumble upon an Ouija board. I'd never used one before, but I'd always heard stories regarding them. Stories about how you should never use them and how dangerous they can be. Now, I'm not someone who believes in paranormal things, so I always thought those stories were a bunch of silly tales. Well, one evening, I had looked up a couple of videos on how to use them, and I attempted to do the same thing. For the most part, everything went well, and I believed I closed the session correctly. However, the next couple of days, I would notice some strange activity. For one, the house felt very heavy. How can I explain it? It's like whenever you were inside, you would feel really down, and as soon as you left, it's like a weight was lifted off your shoulders. Something else to note were a couple of nights where I would see what looked like shadows in the hallway. They were always out of sight, but you could notice them in your peripheral vision. My parents told me that I was seeing things, and of course, they never believed what I was telling them, not that I could blame them. Well, one evening would change all of this. See, I forgot to mention, but I was living in Chicago, and there were a lot of break-ins during that time. So, I was home, and I was playing Super Mario Sunshine on my GameCube. It was around midnight, and that's when I noticed light coming from the window next to me. That's when I thought, perhaps it was my parents returning, so I head over. However, instead of seeing headlights, all I'm able to see were the porch lights turn on. These lights are the kind that will turn on anytime it detects movement. At first I didn't mind it, since there are cats that will occasionally jump into our backyard. They've even been caught on our security cameras. So I get back to playing my game, but the lights once again illuminate my room. This ended up happening a couple more times, and that's until I started to get suspicious. So I grab my baseball bat and I make my way around the house. Nothing. No cars, no cats, no people. I'm really concerned at this point, so I call the police and have them come over. They check out the entire property, but they don't end up finding anyone. They do tell me that if anything else comes up that I shouldn't hesitate to call. That's what ends up happening an hour later. I suddenly wake up to the sounds of footsteps coming from the basement, and let me tell you, they were loud. It even sounded like things were being thrown around. This time I head outside with the phone and I wait for officers to arrive. When they head down there, they explain the same weird sensation I had described, the one where you would feel this huge weight on your shoulder. But what they did notice was one of the tables had been completely tossed over, with the chairs following suit. Lastly, a bunch of the clothing in the washing machine was thrown out on the concrete floor. Here's the really creepy part. The cameras did record everything. The lights ended up turning on and off, and it even showed the officers entering the home. But not once were there any signs of somebody breaking in. Later on, more of the same activity would take place, but it got to the point where we had to have somebody bless the house, and almost immediately, everything had stopped. So, my question is, what do all of you think? I'd really appreciate any answers you guys have. Thanks. Story number 13. Unexplained activity in my old home. Thought I'd go ahead and share a story of mine. I live in Bamberg, Germany, and it's here there are many old homes that were built back in the early 1900s. Now, anyone who knows history knows about the great conflicts that we had to deal with in the 30s and in the 40s. This means that a lot of the homes in towns near us are extremely old, and they have a lot of history to them. With that said, my wife and I ended up moving into this home that used to belong to old relatives of ours. They had passed a few years prior, and the home remained empty. Well, After moving in, we started to notice strange things happen. We usually ignored it as they were just minor inconveniences. Anyways, one evening I had returned early from work and I decided to go on Skype to call my friend. So there we were, just catching up, talking about life, when my friend points something out in the background.
Hey, is your wife home right now? No, she went to go pick up some groceries. Why? Okay, because I just saw a shadow behind you. It's by the dresser.
I thought he was messing around with me, so I turned around. And guess what? No one was there.
Oh, come on. Quit playing around like that. No one else is in the house with me.
He insisted he had seen someone, and telling by his reaction, part of me was believing that he wasn't making it up. We talk for another 10 minutes, and that's when there's a very loud crash that's heard from the basement. I literally jumped out of my chair in panic, as I now feared that somebody had broken into the house.
Dude, I think someone's in my house. I'm gonna put my headphones in, bring you with me. If you hear anything happen, call the police.
I then began checking each of the rooms, trying to find any source to the noise, but nothing. Finally, I made my way into the basement, and when I turned on the lights, that's when I see it. One of my old TVs had fallen on the basement floor. But here's the thing, it's really heavy, and you would have to push it in order for it to fall. Unless somebody had broken in, there would be no way it would move on its own. Instantly, I head upstairs, and I grab some sage. I then begin to cleanse the house the way my grandma had taught me to do. And here's where it gets even more creepier. My wife arrives while I'm in the middle of cleansing, and as she pulls into the driveway, she says she saw a shadow from the second-story window. She watched it for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then she tells me that it walked off onto the other side of the room, and it disappeared. Safe to say, something was in her house, as the activity soon stopped right after. Before we get to the last story, I just want to say thank you once again for making it this far in the video. Remember, if you'd like to see more, including previews and exclusive content, then make sure to be following me over on my Instagram, @TheCreepyFoxOfficial. Thanks. On to the last story. Story number 14. A personal story from myself, the Creepy Fox. Hey everyone, it's me, the Creepy Fox. I figured that for this last story, I would go ahead and include one of my own personal experiences. This one is one I've shared with friends, but I don't think I've ever took the time to share it on my channel or even online. Well, the good thing is I even have some picture proof for this. Okay, let me get started with some background for all of you. It took place in 2013, and at the time, I was 21 years old. So I'd gone to San Francisco with my sister and my cousins, and we ended up going because we wanted to go see the band Paramore. Now, the concert went well, but that's not the unexplained experience I want to talk to you guys about. See, we'd planned to stay for 3 days. Friday, we would settle into the hotel and we would just relax. Saturday was the concert, and then Sunday would be the final day to explore before heading back home in the evening. So, let's fast forward to Sunday afternoon. It was around, 4 p.m., and with the 3 or so hours we had left, we ended up visiting the Golden Bridge to take pictures and just take in the sights. To go there, we ended up parking near a park area. That was about a 15-minute walk from the bridge. Once we parked, we ended up going down a trail that had some abandoned tunnels next to it. Now, at the end of this dirt trail, you had to go through this old tunnel. Inside, there is graffiti and trash, and it honestly looked pretty creepy. But what was so spooky about it was the dark corner about halfway in. Honestly, I was thinking that at any moment somebody was going to pop out. So, I was documenting our little adventure by taking pictures on my mom's iPad. As for my cousins and my sister, they ended up going further up ahead, and I stayed in the tunnel to take some photos. Anyways, I stopped in the middle, and that's when I got the chills. Now, yeah, there was a breeze, but it felt different. Now, little did I know that that was just the beginning. So we move on, we go up some trails, and we ended up arriving at this information center. It was there they had this little store with some souvenirs and antiques. So, fast forward an hour, and we're heading back to the car, and this is where I'll begin to show you the pictures. So, if you're listening to the video, make sure to be watching the screen right now. Okay, we get back to the tunnel, and that's when I tell my cousins and sister to keep walking. While they're walking, I would go ahead and take pictures of their back, as it kind of made for a pretty cool photo opportunity. On screen right now, you can see some of the photos I took of them entering, and everything, as you can see, looks pretty normal. Then, I take a couple of more photos. In them, this is where you can see their shadows, as we're about halfway inside. Now, pay attention to the detail. Now, do you notice something else along with their shadows? Specifically, that blue mist? Yeah, I couldn't figure it out either. But that's not the last thing. We exit the tunnel, and that's when I take one final photo. After I do so, I put the iPad away. Now let's fast forward to 9 p.m., and this is when my mom and dad are picking up my sister and I. At this point, my aunt had already picked up my cousins. As my mom was going through the photos, that's when she pointed to something that she found weird. As you can see on screen right now, you're able to see what looks like a shadow figure of some sort that's in the middle of the tunnel. Now, let me explain some things. When we had started to go back to the car, no one else was in the immediate area. I know this because I'd been looking through the screen, and not once did I see anybody walk through the tunnel. Also, my cousins and sister were all accounted for as they had been walking up ahead of me. As for me, I was the only one who'd stopped to take the photos. Well, I had the photo looked at by various photography experts, and they told me they can't really explain it. It is possible that maybe somebody walked in when I wasn't paying attention. Maybe, but I know for a fact that I saw nobody walk in there. Now, what I do believe is this, and I think it has to do with the history around the tunnel. It's right next to the Golden Bridge, and I'm pretty sure you guys know the dark history there. With so many passings in the immediate area, I think it's very possible that I might have caught something paranormal. After all, what about that blue mist? Anyways, what do you guys think? I just wanted to share my story and see what you guys have to say about it. Hello everyone. Welcome back. Glad to see you made it out in one piece. Thanks once again for tuning in to today's episode. Remember, if you're new around here and this is the first time you've seen one of my videos, then make sure to check out what else I have. You see, one thing you'll like is that I don't read the same stories that others have already narrated. I don't take stories from Reddit, and I surely don't repeat the same thing. Therefore, make sure to stick around for exclusive, never-before-heard content. So, I know it's been a while, hasn't it? Actually, I think as this video goes up, it's been, like 2 weeks since the last video? Yeah, since not many of you saw the last one, you might have missed the message I gave you all. The reason I took a week off was because I had some family that was visiting from Mexico. Also, it was my mom's birthday, so we went to Vegas for a couple of days. It was pretty fun. We didn't really win anything, but hey, at least we went for the trip, right? It was about 4 hours, so not too bad. So remember how I told those who watched last week's video about my schedule picking up at work? Well, it's still pretty busy. Actually, as I'm recording this week's episode, I just got off of a 6-day non-stop work week at Disney. These couple of days, they were supposed to be my days off, but I decided to work on a video. But let's see, what other new things have happened? Oh, yeah, that's right. We have a couple of new pets that are now part of our family. A week ago, my sister stumbled upon a rabbit just roaming around her work. We tried to find the owners, but we just decided to take him in and take care of him. He's really nice. His name's Cappuccino. He lets you pet him and hold him, which is pretty funny. Then we got a parakeet. Actually, it was gifted to us by a family friend. So yeah, the animal family just got even bigger. If you guys want to see more of my pets, then you can go give me a follow on my Instagram, @TheCreepyFoxOfficial. With all of that, I want to go ahead and thank some people. First and foremost, thank you to all of you who sent in your stories. Then, thank you to my good buddy, Yeah Man TV, for, once again, providing us with an amazing character for our episode today. Through the many months of us working together, we've brought to life countless characters and experiences. So, here's to many more spooky adventures together. Lastly, thank you to Swamp Dweller for helping with today's video. He's been one of the kindest and well-respected narrators I've gotten to know over the past couple of years. Again, Make sure to check out his videos as he uploads almost every day. He's like me in that he features stories that haven't been narrated anywhere else, so I know you'll enjoy his work. So friends, we end today's video with a question, and it's something like this. Where would you spend all of your time if you could? Myself, I would love to be able to go to Puerto Vallarta in Jalisco and go on permanent vacation forever. That'd be the ultimate dream. Anyways, this has been our Unexplained Stories series, and I'm the Creepy Fox. I'll talk to you all next time. Take care, and have an amazing day.